Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Center for Spiritual Living Victoria Online. My name is Carrie Hunter, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here right now. As I'm recording this, it is Sunday afternoon, and we have finished our morning festivities and coffee time and sharing Father's Day messages and having some wonderful desserts afterward. So sorry you couldn't be there with us for that, but we welcome you anytime you'd like to pop in on Sunday in person at 380 Cook Street in the Cook Street Village Activity Center. We would love to welcome you there and to chat with you there. So today my talk was titled, So How Many of Us Are There on This Planet Anyway? And I was sharing with people this morning that typically toward the end of the month, there are those in our administrative part of the center who are asking me what my theme is going to be for the next month and what my titles are going to be for my talks. And so I send them along. And usually it comes from just a few minutes of meditation where things come to me. But this week when I looked at that title, I thought, what on earth was I thinking? And occasionally that happens to me where I have some idea for a title and there's something relevant that's going on. But when the time comes to really write or to speak, I don't remember what it was that I was thinking. And this week was certainly one of them. So I thought about the population of the Earth, which is now 8 billion people, which has gone up 4 billion. It's doubled since 1980. But this is the first year that the numbers have begun to diminish. So we're kind of on a downward trend, which is actually good news for the entire planet. But that's not what I was going to talk about. So I was meditating and praying, and then it was like, oh, okay, there really aren't 8 billion of us. I mean, there might be 8 billion containers of God stuff, because that's what we are, as Dr. Ernest Holmes, our founder, said, that we're spirit having a human experience. And so we're just these containers. And spirit is within each and every one of us, the same amount in everyone. Mother Teresa didn't have more, Gandhi didn't have more, Jesus didn't have more. We all have the same amount. It's very democratic. It's just that we're not all awakened to it. And Ernest Holmes called Jesus the most orbed human being, that he was basically the example of who we could all become if we really aligned ourselves with the divine energy, the intelligence of the universe. Whatever you want to call it, it's fine. It doesn't make any difference. It is what it is. And so there was this man who was called the King. And wherever he went, there were crowds who wanted to listen to him. He was controversial, even, in families. Some people, some people really, really enjoyed what he had to share, and others did not. Authority figures were worried about him because there was a societal change that was going on at the time. And then he experienced a tragic death at a very early age. And shortly afterward, there were people who reported seeing him in the flesh. They couldn't quite figure out what was going on, but there were people who reported it. So as I'm talking about this, you are likely thinking that I'm talking about Jesus, but I'm not. I'm talking about Elvis. All of those words apply to Elvis as well. And my reason for doing that is to show that, there are people who fit descriptions of all kinds. And when we start to compare, we see that they are very, very different in so many ways. And what was the difference between Elvis and Jesus? Well, Dr. Holmes would say that Elvis lived his life on the outside, from the outside in. He was out there before the crowds because he enjoyed entertaining. That's what he was brought here to do. His whole life was based upon that outer image of himself. He got into drugs. His health really suffered, and he died an early death as a result. Where with Jesus, Jesus was a master teacher. Again, the example of who we can become if we really align ourselves with the divine. You know, Elvis's name will go on for quite a while because every generation tends to hear a story about him or stories. They perhaps listen to his music or they hear other people singing his music. And of course, next week, there's an Elvis film that is being released rather, not reduced. And there'll be another generation that gets to listen to the music that Elvis sang, and they'll learn more about his life. And that won't go on forever. But think about it, after more than 2,000 years, everyone knows who Jesus was. Jesus' name is eternal. The stories about him will go on forever and ever and ever. A third of the world's population identifies as Christian. Think about that. A third of the world's population. Jesus' teachings became Christianity. He was a Jew. He was not a Christian. People became Christians because of the way he taught. And what he taught was about love. And he taught about peace. And he taught that really this presence, this holy presence, is within each and every one of us. Such an important thing for us to remember. You know, Elvis was similar, but again, on the outside in, and Jesus on the inside out. So we're all the same in spirit, you know, and think about it this way. When you think about your body, there are hundreds of trillions of cells, and every one of them is important for us to have the lives that we have. And beyond our bodies, well, inside our bodies, beyond our bodies as well, is this quantum field. It's invisible. I mean, it can be detected now under gigantic microscopes, but certainly couldn't be detected until that happened. And these particles make up absolutely everything. They make up you, they make up me, they make up the monitor you're looking into right now, or the whatever the electronic device is. They make up a chair you might be sitting in. They make up the building, they make up the air we breathe, the trees outside, the flowers, everything. And when we think about that, when we think about how we're all connected through this energy, through this intelligence, that's where the idea of oneness comes in, the concept of oneness. And I was thinking about that, and I thought, you know, how can we explain this? Because I think this is perhaps one of the biggest things that we try to get our minds around. It. You know, we're all one. How can that be when there are 8 billion of us? How can we all be one? And this last week in our practitioner class, we were talking about Dr. Jill Bolton. And I don't know if you read her book, A Stroke of Insight. But it really, really helps to describe what it is that I'm wanting to say. Dr. Bolton got out of the shower one morning and had a massive headache. And she was leaning against the wall in the bathroom. And all of a sudden, she saw everything at a molecular level. You know, hundreds of trillions and more of molecules in her body, her hands, in the walls, in everything around her. And somehow, through it all, she still was able to understand that she was having a stroke. And she knew that she had to get help. She was in serious trouble. And she made her way to her desk, and she knew where her business cards were, because she couldn't think of numbers or remember them. And she pulled out a business card and looked at the phone, the buttons on the phone. Now, the thing is that the numbers on her business card all just looked like little squiggles. And the same thing on the keypad of the phone. And so what she had to do was lift up her left hand, take a finger, and as she identified a squiggle, or the squiggles that represented a number on the card, and then found it on the keypad, she would push the number on the keypad, and then she would move that finger over to the next number so that it would cover the one she had just seen, because it was also massively confusing. And she kept on doing that. It took her 45 minutes to make a phone call to her office. And when the person answered at the other end, she sounded like a barking dog. And Dr. Bolton sounded like a barking dog to the woman on the other end of the line. But they knew her number. They knew that she was in serious trouble and she needed help. And they called for help. Dr. Bolton was taken to hospital, and it took her 8 years to recover speech, to recover um, her typical way of thinking, to recover movement in her body, and so on. And today she lives a perfectly, well, I was going to say perfectly normal life, but it's an enhanced life that she's living, because she's become a popular inspirational speaker. And she talks about what happened to her that day. But for me, the most fascinating thing of all that she told was about how when she had this stroke, when she saw everything at a molecular level, that she was outside her body. She could see this container that was her body. But when she was outside her body, she was part of this energy of everything. And yet at the same time, she recognized the container that was her body. She knew that she had to get back down into that. And so she started to push herself into the body. She said she was just so much more massive than it was. And she said it hurt and it was noisy. And she kept on working at it, but she finally was able to get back into her body again. Imagine that. Imagine being out of your body and being able to look around and see how massive you are as a soul. And then knowing that that particular container that you're looking at is what you have to get back into if you're going to experience life on Earth. And she said she's probably one of the very few people in the world who was ever able to see the inside of her brain from the outside. You know, she could see everything that was going on in that physical body. And she did recover. But if you think about that, think about her experience, think about her being outside her body, you know, that everything is energy, everything is connected, and yet she still had this individual self. And it was represented by the container that she saw that she needed to fit into. I love that story. Love it. Now, as I was thinking about these things in the past week and wondering what on earth I was going to talk about today, what really came to mind as I was praying and meditating was how important it is to recognize that we are one with everyone and with everything. You know, to look at all of the beauty around us and to just absorb that, and to know that we're one with it, and that we somehow are represented in it as well, because we're all of the same energy. And so I started to practice this last week. I started with a little boy who was probably, well, he was a toddler. He was probably about 1.5 or 2. He was just walking. And I was walking down the street in Sydney where I live, and he was with his mom, and he looked at me, and he waved a little, and he said hi. And so I waved back at him and said hi. And then I had the thought, you know, he's part of me and I'm part of him. At an energy level, we're part of one another. There's no separation at all. And then there was somebody coming along pushing a man in a wheelchair, and I said hi or hello to him and smiled at the woman who was pushing the wheelchair. And I thought, oh, you know, they're part of me and I'm part of them. And then I went into a coffee shop, and there was a man from Jamaica in the coffee shop, and I've seen him once or twice before. And he talks to himself. The thing is, he seems to be pretty lucid, except I never really understand what it is he's trying to convey. But he seems to be with it. And he just sits and talks to himself. And for some reason, he's talking about people who are Irish, and he's from Jamaica. And I've never sorted out the rest of it, and haven't even attempted to, because it just, you know, didn't know how. But that day, as I was entering the coffee shop, I could hear his voice, and I thought, aha. he's part of me and I'm part of him. And he was talking about the Irish, and he said to me, and here comes an Irish girl. And I just said, yep, and smiled at him and kept on going. And he kept on and kept on and kept on. And then finally, when he was ready to leave, he stood up and he came over to my table and he said, in Jamaica, we look at everybody as just being the same. He said, it doesn't matter what color you are. You can be black, white, yellow, green, purple. It doesn't matter. Everybody's the same in Jamaica. And he said, here, it's very, very different. And I said, I'm sorry that you experienced that. And he said, he said, you're a fine Irish Catholic girl. Well, I laughed and I said, yeah, I guess I am. I didn't want to continue the conversation because I had no idea really what it was all about. Anyway, he turned and left, and his harmonious voice was ringing in my ears. And again, I thought, so I'm part of you and you're part of me, and I don't have to figure it out. It doesn't matter. And then yesterday, Saturday, the most beautiful experience, really. I was doing a memorial service at a funeral chapel. And I had been in touch with the woman who was organizing it. She was from Nova Scotia. And the service was for her sister, who was only 60 years old when she passed. She had COPD. And she explained to me, she was coming out from Nova Scotia, but she explained to me that that the family had been, they try to connect, that they're mostly separated because many of them are living in tents right now. They can't afford the rent in Victoria. And what immediately flashed in my mind is, the homeless people that we see on the streets. And then I thought, no, that isn't necessarily the case. They may not be into drugs. They may not have any kind of mental illness at all. This just could be something that's happening because of the times in which we live. And they are part of me, and I am part of them. And when I did that, I just felt any judgment that I had just disappeared. And I felt this pure love come out. In a way, it's kind of like recognizing that for the grace of God go I. And so when I arrived at the funeral home, there were maybe 20 people outside. They were all in the parking lot chatting with one another, and I realized that this was family. They were getting together to honor their sister, their mother, their aunt, whatever she might have been. And they hadn't all seen one another recently. So, I smiled at them and said hello. And I said, anytime you want, anytime you want to come in, feel free to do so. And I went ahead inside and went to the special room where I would leave my purse and any personal belongings. And one by one, they found me, and each one came in and just gave me a big, big hug. And it was very touching because that's never happened before. Anyway, the service began, and there came a point in the service where I said that the woman who'd passed, that her husband wanted to speak. And he had also chosen some music to be played at that point. Now, they wanted a relatively religious ceremony, which I don't usually do, but they'd asked for the Lord's Prayer, and they'd asked for the 23rd Psalm, and so on, which I'm happy to do. There was no problem with that. And they chose some hymns, one to open and one to close. But he had chosen a special song for his wife. And when he got up to speak, he was wearing a baseball cap and looking at, a bit shabby, as did many of them. And I realized, that they were struggling. And he was so dear. He talked about his wife, and he said, she's the love of my life. He said, I miss her so much. I'll miss her always, and I will love her forever. And he said, this is our love song. And he had chosen The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face by Roberta Flack. Well, I, I, I was choked up. It's such a beautiful song. And I thanked him. And he was crying. And he said that that song was played at our wedding. And he cried some more, and we embraced. And then he went and sat down. And I was so moved by his story. And afterward, again, the funeral director came, and what he typically does is he comes and escorts me to the back of the room. And then as people leave, I'll shake hands, or I'll say something to them, or we'll have a conversation. And what happened was each person as they came along gave me a hug. And the husband of the woman who had passed stopped and talked. And you know, he said, we used to rent a little house out in Sydney. It was across from the Anacortes Ferry. And I said, that's where I live. Not in a house, but I live in a condo building there. And I said, there's a new development going in next to me. There's, a new condo building that's being built there. It's just a hole in the ground right now. They knocked 3 houses down. Anyway, he and his wife had rented one of those houses. But after the houses were torn down, they didn't have a place to go because the rents have gone up so high in Sydney, in Victoria, in the surrounding area. There wasn't anything that they could afford. And he said they were finally they were homeless for a while. They were living in a tent. And then they were able to rent one room in a house where they could also have their cat. Now, these two people raised, um, well, his wife had 3 children. She'd been married before. He had 5 children from a previous marriage. Together, they raised 8 children of their own, the combined family, and then 8 other children who had been in foster care, who had grown up with them and had made something of their lives. And the members of the family who were living in tents, who are living in tents right now, are living in tents because they can't make enough money to rent an apartment or a suite in a house, and to feed themselves as well and clothe themselves. I pray for them. They will be in my daily prayers from this moment on. But what really struck me was, as I looked at them and thought, you're part of me and I am part of you, was this enormous love that I felt for them, and this understanding and this compassion. But what I also realized was they really are living lives where they have so little in the way of material things, but they have so much love to give. It was so clear. And so, again, as I was considering this yesterday, I remember what Dr. Holmes said about, we have the choice to live our lives from the outside in or the inside out. And if we're living our lives from the inside out, then we're living the lives that our God's selves wish to be, how they wish to express on this earth. If we're living from the outside in, we're more like Elvis. And I don't want to demean Elvis in any way. I'm part of Elvis. Elvis is part of me. But I'm just saying there is an enormous difference in the way that we look at things, in the way that we behave, in the way that we do whatever it is that we do. And so there may be 8 billion containers of the divine on this planet, but there's really only one. That one is all energy, all intelligence. It is God. And so it is. Thank you so much for being with me today. And again, if you'd like to join us in person, we would love to welcome you in person any Sunday. And we begin with a meditation at 10:30, and then our celebration services at 11 in the morning. Lots of music, lots of good people there. and very welcoming, warm community. So feel free to pop in. And if you'd like to share some of your abundance with us, we're very happy to receive your donations at, um, if you go to our website, cslvictoria.org, and there's a button there that says donate. And if you click on that, it will take you to PayPal. But underneath PayPal, it also says if you wish to use your credit card or debit card, you can click there. And then you fill in the information and it's all done. Alternatively, you can send an e-transfer, and the e-transfer address is donate@cslvictoria.org. Or you can drop in person, bring a check, send a check, whatever you choose. I don't like to harp on about money, but I just want you to know that, you know, some of you do give by automatic debit or through one of the other means, and it means so much to us because during the pandemic, we were closed for a good portion of it. We would open now and then for a few months. And so we're very fortunate to still be open. Many churches are not. And it's through the grace, your good graces and the grace of God, that we have been able to stay open and to welcome new people. And we are a growing, thriving community. We're small, but there are new people coming every week. And we just so appreciate all that you do and who you be. So just remember through it all, you're part of this great sea of oneness, this great sea of God. We're all connected one to the other. And let's remember with every person we meet, you know, you are part of me, I am part of you. I can tell you from experience, it is life-changing for the better. Have a wonderful week. Bless you all. And I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.